My father believes that a man is the head of household. My father believes a lot of things that may not. My father's never going to lead with his pronouns in any room, and if he has to, he'll rather leave the room.
Yep.
But he's going to respect your pronouns,
Yep.
and he's never going to vote to restrict your rights. And he's never. In fact, he believes that that's why he fought in the military, was to protect your right to express yourself and to have the health care that you need, whether that's an abortion or gender affirming care. He fought for your right to do that. But based on the attitude of this party, my father, who believes some of the things he believes, is no longer welcome here.
Hey, welcome to Trailblaze. I'm Jamal Simmons. Joining me today is an old friend and a really good pollster and advisor who's been around Democratic politics longer than his youthful face will make you believe. Terrance Woodbury is one of the leaders of HIT Strategies. He also was very involved in the Kamala Harris campaign and a bunch of other campaigns around the country. We want to talk to Terrance about what he thinks happened in the 2024 election as much as he could talk about it. I know we've heard from other people who are strategists in other formats and other podcasts, but I wanted to talk to Terrance because Terrance has a unique view on that campaign. And then also not just get stuck in the past. Let's talk a little bit more about the future and what Democrats need to do. So Terrance, welcome to Trailblaze.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for having me, Jamal. I'm looking forward to diving in and, specifically, like you said, looking forward to the future and how do we start winning again?
All right, good. So let's sweep away the stuff from the past. What the hell happened in the last election, and why are we not preparing for big inaugural parties?
Yeah, unfortunately, Jamal, we saw significant erosion in our base. Look, I look at demographics. I look at crosstabs. I like to break down these groups and see who did what. And when I look at that, I see that white voters stayed pretty consistent. 43% in 2020 supported Democrats, 43% in 2024 supported Democrats. But when I look at voters of color, there's significant erosion. And I believe that men of color specifically are beginning to emerge as the swing voters that will determine the outcome of elections. That's where the greatest shift happened. Both the greatest shift in turnout and the greatest shift in vote support happened amongst men of color. Almost 20% less support for Democrats amongst non-white men. And that was enough to change the outcome in every single battleground state.
And is that something that y'all saw happening real time? Was that something that you could see during the campaign and you were sort of fighting against the tide? Or is that something we just kind of now see once we saw the numbers come in on election night?
This is something we've seen happening since Barack Obama exited the political stage. This is not unique to Kamala Harris. It didn't start with Kamala Harris. And unless we do something drastically different, it's not going to end there. We have seen a continuous drop in support for Democrats amongst men of color since 2012. Every single election cycle, between 2 and 8% less support for Democrats amongst men of color until we have now reached a 20-point erosion. Again, enough to change the outcome of elections. Now, look, I do want to say, because I was on the Harris campaign as a pollster, specifically looking at Black men, that because of some of the steps that Kamala Harris took, like having been the first presidential candidate ever to present a policy specifically for Black and Latino men, employing a lot of the trusted messengers and voices, and then meeting them on platforms where we knew we could reach them, like Club Shay Shay and Charlemagne and others, that because of that, I think we reversed a lot of that erosion, cutting Joe Biden's deficit with Black men in half. And I think with more time, she could have continued to reverse that erosion. But with 107 days and a headwind of, several cycles of erosion, it just wasn't enough time to reverse it.
Do you think the campaign and its allies, let's just not stay on the campaign. Do you think the campaign and its allies spent enough money and time and resources to try to fight that back, or should they have done more?
I think that Democratic campaigns in general have a tendency to prioritize resources on what we like to call general market. Mm-hmm. As a comms professional, Jamal, yes, exactly what I'm talking about. Yes. But when they start making budget allocations, there's a significant amount of the budget that goes towards general market, which is defined as white, and then there are constituencies that get the remainder of those resources. Well, the truth is, for Democrats, the general market is not just white. The general market for Democrats, especially in battleground states like Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, that those are majority people of color. And so I think that that resources have to reflect that. I think that personnel has to reflect that. And then we would see strategy and messaging begin to reflect that.
Okay, so looking forward, we are coming into an environment where Democrats, while the federal level did not go as well as we wanted it to, right? We lost the presidency. We lost more seats in the Senate than we thought we were going to, and we didn't take the House back, which is something that we wanted. So the federal election to me was decisive. Now, even though the numbers were small, it's a 1% race, it still was decisive if you look at the totality. But at the state level, we did pretty well. At the state level, we had governors in places like North Carolina. We saw senators. We also that some of the senators held on despite Trump winning a state like Michigan or Arizona, where we got picked up 2 senators, U.S. senators. We saw in North Carolina where we got rid of the Republican supermajority in the North Carolina legislature, so that now the Democratic governor can govern without having all of his decisions overtaken by the Republicans. And some state court judges. We did a fairly decent job at the state level in the wake of kind of a Republican onslaught at the federal level. So all is not lost, right?
No, that's right. Look, Democrats did better than Kamala Harris in every battleground state. And I think there's a lot of soul searching we're going to have to do to figure that out. I tell folks all the time, I'm not in the business of telling my opinion. I tell the opinions of the voters that I talk to. And frankly, I haven't had a chance to talk to voters in Georgia and Michigan, Arizona post-election to ask them why the ticket splitting. Why does she do much better why did Democrats do better at the top of the ticket than down ballot? So I'm looking forward to finding some of those answers. But I agree, Jamal, all is not lost. But we are going to have to get serious about reassembling this coalition.
So that's where I want to stay, because you said an important thing when we were talking about the campaign. I know everybody wants to, but this has been a generational slide that we've seen. And one question that's just raised for me is, I know we can overdo this thing about men, but men in our party, I heard it literally the weekend before Election Day. We had a young guy come to our house to do some work in our house, and he started talking about how he was voting for Trump, young man of color. I was like, really, why? So I heard it. I've heard a lot, right? So the question for me is, what is it about the Democratic Party today that doesn't make men, even liberal, progressive guys that I know, say things like, oh, I'm just a straight white guy. Nobody cares what I think. Right? like I'm going to vote for her, but I'm a straight white guy. Nobody cares what I think. What is it that is holding us back in terms of being able to reach out to people and make sure everybody feels included in the coalition that we're trying to build that includes, frankly, a lot of straight white guys?
Yeah, look, during post-Obama, we talked a lot about racial anxiety and how white people felt like they were losing their position in a rapidly diversifying society. And it is true that America continues to diversify, and it's not going to stop no matter how many walls we build, no matter, who we ban. America will continue to diversify, and I believe that is our strength. But what we haven't talked enough about is how, just like a lot of white Americans feel like their position in society is changing, men feel like their position in society is changing. And I think that Democrats have to do a better job of a couple things. One, men are angry as they see this shift happening. They're angry at systems that they believe have failed them, not just the political system, but financial systems and education systems. All of the places where men are beginning to underperform, they're angry at those systems. And one party is offering to defend those systems, and the other party is offering to blow those systems up.
So let me ask you: is it policy? Is it language? Or do Democrats need an attitude adjustment? Is it attitude? Are we just, everybody's pissed off and we're trying to have a college seminar? Is that part of our problem?
I believe it's the latter too. I don't believe it's policy, because as we see that the majority of Americans and the majority of men Americans agree with Democrats on policy. Look, when Kamala Harris put out this Black men's agenda for economic prosperity, I mean, it's overwhelmingly popular, right? They support all the things in the agenda. So I believe that most of our politics have become post policy, and that's going to lead to the second two things that you listed there: the message and the attitude. I do think we have to update the message to appeal more to men, and specifically men of color. And I think that message has to reclaim values that are important to men of color, values like masculinity and spirituality and family and patriotism. I tell my Democratic friends all the time, not all masculinity is toxic.
Right.
And so we're going to have to create, we're going to have a conversation about what is the role of masculinity in an evolving society, and what does that mean for men.
Well,
But
can
on
I
the
just say this?
attitude adjustment, yep.
Yeah, I think there are two things that we also have to get on the table, and we have to have frank conversation with our white friends and allies about this, because white people are going to have to talk to white people about racism in the new America that we're creating and how it is, what the role is, the place for white people in the coalition that we're building. You and I could do it. I can talk about it. I'm happy to do it, and maybe it may fall on us to do some of it, but I feel like they're more credible messengers if somebody who comes from their community can come and say, listen, here's how it is we all live together. Here's how it is it all works. Here's how it is you're going to be able to feed your family. Here's how it is we're going to have the society, number one. Number two, I have thought for a generation, I've said this before in public, if white people talk to white people on Monday the way that white politicians talk to black people on Sunday, we would all be much better off. Right? Because when white politicians go to church, they talk about values. They talk about the underpinnings of the why question, why it is they're Democrats, why it is we have to do the things that are important. It's not just about whether or not it's rooted in Judeo-Christian, kind of philosophy. It's really, or religion. It's really about who am I? Why do I believe this? And what's this project that we're all in together? We do that on Sunday when we talk to black people. And then on Monday morning, we go into a boardroom or we go into some event, and it's like we're having a policy seminar.
No, I mean, look, that's spot on, Jamal. But I think we all have these conversations with America, right? And I give the example when Barack Obama was running for president, and he understood that racism had the potential to undermine his candidacy. He didn't wag his finger at white people and say, "Shame on you for being racist." He had the race speech from Philadelphia, his most important speech of the campaign, in which he explained how even his grandmother, who he loved more than anybody in the world, right, held unconscious bias because of how she had been conditioned by society. Well, we have to have that same conversation about men who are concerned with a woman being president, not just wag our finger at them and say, "Shame on you for being sexist," but that the role of gender and sexuality is evolving in America, and there is a place for men and for masculinity in that evolution. And that there's not something wrong with them for learning in church that the man is head of household, but that society, that they can hold that belief and continue to evolve with society.
That's right. And they can argue about that at the dinner table, right? Like the women who disagree with that can argue with the men in their lives about that at the dinner table. But as political actors, we've got to figure out how is it that we talk to people where they are and then bring them to where it is we want them to be or to get where they are. So the question for me is, because I think it's not just, I heard you talk about this in another environment. It's not just the men who are bought into some of these ideas. There are women in our lives who also believe that men should hold certain positions, men should protect their families, men should earn money, men should if listen, in my house, when my wife hears a knock downstairs or like some sort of bump, she don't get up and go see what it is. Right? I'm the one that gets elbowed in the ribs and gets sent downstairs, right, to be sacrifice myself for the family.
That's right. There's a bump in the night. You know what to do.
And so that is something I think we have to also recognize, that this, while we talk about this about men, that there are a lot of women who also are raised in a culture where men and women have both have roles to play in their lives and their families. And that doesn't mean, because a lot of these women, like in my family, they work every day. They put money into the pot. They put food on the table. They, my mother, I'll say this now, my mother carried a gun in her purse when I was a kid, sure, right? Like they do the things that were, that they need to do to take care of things, but they also want men to do things that they want and for men to feel included and involved. And when men are sitting around playing watching football games and talking trash, they don't feel like the men are accosting them. They just feel like the boys are in the living room doing what boys do. And when they get done, I'm gonna send them outside to go rake the leaves and go clean up the house.
That's right. Look, and I don't think that, while I don't agree with those attitudes, those are the same attitudes that govern my house. I don't think that my parents were wrong. And this is the attitude adjustment, right? Is because Democrats are going to have to adjust this attitude where if you disagree with us or if you believe something different, then you are not welcomed. This is a big tent party, and big tents are going to have a lot of ideas. I don't think it's our job to change what people believe. I think it's our job to change how they vote. right? My father,
Right.
and this is where we get to some of
It's a
the
really important
progressive.
point you're making. Can you make that point again, just so the people in
Yeah,
the
listen,
back?
listen, listen. We don't have to change what everyone believes, and most important, we don't have to make them feel bad for what they believe. My parents shouldn't feel bad for believing that my father's the head of household. They should just vote appropriately. And look, the example I always give is my father. Right, my father believes that there are only two genders. My father believes that a man is the head of household. My father believes a lot of things that may not. My father's never going to lead with his pronouns in any room, and if he has to, he'll rather leave the room.
Yep.
But he's going to respect your pronouns,
Yep.
and he's never going to vote to restrict your rights. And he's never. In fact, he believes that that's why he fought in the military, was to protect your right to express yourself and to have the health care that you need, whether that's an abortion or gender affirming care. He fought for your right to do that. But based on the attitude of this party, my father, who believes some of the things he believes, is no longer welcome here.
Well, you said this I saw previously, and I think it's right. If you're talking about protecting, and I thought this during the campaign, it's our job for men who think they ought to protect their families, right? To protect my daughter, my wife, my cousins, protect their rights to their own healthcare choices, protect their ability to make their own decisions without the government telling them what to do. So it
That's right.
doesn't, again, get back to, we don't have to change our policies.
That's exactly right.
We're just talking about them in a way that invites everybody into the discussion.
That's right. Change your attitude.
Right.
We're not trying to change the policies, right? Like, as the head of my household, it's my responsibility to protect my family from intrusive governments. Or like, if God gave women, if God gives us all freedom of choice, then why should government give any less than that? That's how we wrap our progressive issues in values that frankly a lot of men of color are hold much more valuable than they hold the Democratic Party.
So we talked a lot about men. Before I let you go, let me just say this. Also, we don't talk enough, I think, in the Democratic Party about people making money. People want to get paid, right? Like people want to make money. And I think we are resistant in many ways to talking a lot about how, look, it's okay to just want to make money, buy a bigger house, have a nice car, get your, buy some better clothes, like whatever it is you want. It's okay to want to do that. Obviously, we want to do that without taking advantage of people, but we want you to be able to do that. There was a woman that the vice president met when I worked for her who talked about how she wanted a child tax credit because she wanted to make sure that she could keep building her business every day. And what was happening then was like every day at 3:00, she had to stop working her business so she could go pick up her kid from school. And if she had her kid in childcare after school, she would be able to keep her business going for another couple of hours. We've got to be able to talk about those policies that we have that also talk about protect your right to keep your business going, to work an extra shift at the plant if you've got one, to like make sure that to do the things that your family needs to keep going economically, as well as all the social goods that we're trying to create.
That's exactly right, Jamal. And frankly, people make more money under Democrats. We just don't know how to talk. We don't talk about that often enough, right? And one of the most important qualities to most Americans is self-determination, right? People don't want to be taken care of. They don't want to be rescued. They don't want to be saved.
Right.
They want to have the resources that they need to take care of their families. And this is, again, not a shift in policy, but a shift in messaging, a shift from Democrats as caretakers, that want to lift people out of poverty. And look, I've been saying for a long time, Democrats got to move from poverty reduction messaging to wealth creation messaging, because even poor people want to be rich.
Yeah, I've never met anybody. We all want to raise the minimum wage. I have never met a single person who wanted to make the minimum wage.
That's exactly right.
Everybody wants to make more than the minimum wage.
Exactly. And even poor people don't think that they're poor, right? I got family that might describe themselves as broke,
right?
But they're not describing themselves as poor. And so if we're having a conversation with poor people about reducing poverty, we're missing most Americans who will never consider themselves poor.
All right. Very good. Terrance Woodbury, thank you for being on Trailblaze. We will see you soon.
I appreciate you, Jamal. Come back anytime, man.